The slave trade was not just a crime. It was a story built on one lie that had to be total, had to be everywhere, and could not, under any circumstances, have exceptions. The lie was simple. Black people are inferior. Not just enslaved. Inferior. Incapable of honor. Incapable of greatness. Fit only for chains. That lie needed to survive. And a black samurai was the most dangerous thing on earth to it. So they made him disappear. The slave trade was not just a crime. It was a story built on one lie that had to be total, had to be everywhere, and could not, under any circumstances, have exceptions. The lie was simple. Black people are inferior. Not just enslaved. Inferior. Incapable of honor. Incapable of greatness. Fit only for chains. That lie needed to survive. And a black samurai was the most dangerous thing on earth to it. So they made him disappear. His name was Yasuke. He arrived in Japan in 1579, alongside Italian Jesuit missionaries, led by a priest named Alessandro Valliano. Historical records suggest he came from Mozambique. Some scholars point to Ethiopia or the Sudan region. What every document agrees on. He was tall, powerfully built, and he walked into a room like he already owned it. When Valliano brought him before Oda Nobunaga, the warlord who was in the middle of forcing an entire nation to bow to him, Nobunaga stopped. He had spent his life collecting exceptional things, and he recognized immediately that Yasuke was one of them. Understand what Japan was in 1579. Your birth was your destiny. Foreigners were barely tolerated. The samurai class was sealed from the outside. You were born into it, or you were not. It simply was not done. Within months, Nobunaga did it anyway. He granted Yasuke the rank of samurai, a katana, land, a home, a stipend, and a permanent place at his side. Yasuke learned Japanese, trained in combat alongside men who had given their entire lives to this. He stood guard while Nobunaga slept. He rode into battle at his lord and Oppo's side. For 3 years, not as decoration, not as a curiosity, as a warrior. Yasuke became a samurai in 1580. The Mayflower did not land until 1620. 40 years before the founding myth of America. A black man had already earned something most people on earth could not. June 21st, 1582. Nobunaga was resting at Honnoji Temple in Kyoto. Small guard. Quiet night. Then one of his own generals, Akechi Mitsuhide, surrounded the temple with 13,000 soldiers. There was no rescue coming. Nobunaga knew it immediately. He performed seppuku, the samurai ritual of dying with honor. Rather than surrendering, the temple burned. Yasuke could have run. The smoke was cover. The chaos was total. No one would have stopped him. He did not run. He fought his way across a burning city to Nijo Castle, where Nobunaga and Oppo's heir was sheltering. And he kept fighting until the castle fell, until there was nothing left, until they finally took him. When Yasuke was brought before Akechi Mitsuhide, the general had one decision: execute him as an enemy samurai, or spare him. He spared him. But listen to the exact words recorded in the documents. Akechi called Yasuke an animal, not Japanese, not worthy of execution. He sent him back to the missionaries. That sounds like mercy. It was not mercy. Akechi could not execute Yasuke with samurai honors, because that would require him to say out loud that a black man had earned them. He could not do it. So instead, he stripped the title with one sentence and sent him away. The most powerful statement in that moment was not what Akechi said. It was what he refused to say. After that day, Yasuke vanished from the record. What happened to him, no one knows. But here is what you need to understand. His story was not lost. The letters survived. The temple records existed. Period artwork depicted him. Jesuit correspondence described him in detail. The evidence was sitting in the archives for 400 years. And Western historians, who had full access to those documents, chose not to include him. Not in books about Japan. Not in books about the samurai. Not in books about Oda Nobunaga. Not once. They did not lose his story. They looked at the evidence and made a decision. Every historian who published a book about feudal Japan, without Yasuke and Oppo's name in it, made a choice. That is not an accident. That is architecture. And Yasuke was not alone. Portuguese and Spanish records from the same era document other Africans in Japan arriving through the same trade routes. that were shipping enslaved people to the Americas. After Nobunaga and Appo's death, historical records show Toyotomi Hideyoshi employed several African men as guards and performers at his court. Their names did not survive, but their presence is documented. In paintings, in letters, in official records, they were there. This is not a coincidence. It is a pattern. Black people have always been global, even at the height of the slave trade. Even in the worst years of that horror, Black people were on every shore, learning every language, rising to heights that no colony would permit. The idea that African people contributed nothing to world history except forced labor is not just wrong. It is a lie that was constructed, maintained, and enforced, one deleted name at a time. It was Japanese historians, working entirely outside Western racial frameworks, who finally brought these documents into the light. They examined the records, the letters, the artwork, the temple documents, and they said what should have been said. 400 years ago, Yasuke was real. He was a samurai. His story is part of Japanese history, and no amount of editorial silence can undo what the primary sources confirm. If they erased a black samurai who stood beside one of the most powerful men in Japanese history, what else did they erase? How many black queens ruled kingdoms, whose names have been scrubbed from every textbook? How many inventors created things that were stolen and credited to someone else? How many warriors, scholars, architects, and leaders were cut from the record because their excellence was too dangerous to acknowledge? The erasure of Yasuke is not an isolated mistake. It is a method, repeated across continents, across centuries, generation after generation. But here is what they could never erase: the truth itself. The documents survived, the records endured, and now, centuries later, Yasuke and Appo's name is being spoken again. Your history is longer than they taught you. Your ancestors were more than what they allowed you to learn. From the courts of feudal Japan, to the kingdoms of West Africa, to the resistance movements across the Americas, Black people have always been warriors, scholars, inventors, leaders, explorers. Their stories survived because the truth, no matter how deep it is buried, always rises. Yasuke walked into Kyoto in 1579. The crowd thought he was a god. They were wrong. He was something more remarkable than that. He was a man. Fully, completely, undeniably a man. With more courage, honor, and dignity than the people who tried to delete him will ever be remembered for. They erased his name for 400 years. We are saying it now. Yasuke, the Black Samurai. Remember him. If this story hit you, if it made you angry, or proud, or both, then you already know why this channel exists. Because Yasuke is not the only one they deleted. Subscribe to Ancestors and Appo's Glory. Every week, we pull another name out of the archive they built to bury it. The record is longer than they told you. We are just getting started.